Hello, hello. Wow, what a powerhouse day this has been so far, hasn't it? I'm more inspired now, and I needed this. It's been rough, but I'm so inspired now that I'm hearing these voices of these amazing young people. And it's actually made me much more resolute. And I think what we're going to talk about today and the importance of incorporating youth voice in everything that we do meaningfully. I am so honored to be moderating this session on thriving online, promoting resilience and well-being in a connected world. We have some amazing panelists, two amazing teens. I'm going to go through and allow you guys to introduce yourself because I couldn't do it justice, and two representatives from industry. Although I guess Matt, you're kind of industry, but yeah, you can introduce yourself. But I'd love to be able to go down the line and have you all introduce yourselves. Anika, Raffle, please.
Hi, my name is Anika, and I'm a senior at Palo Alto High School. So other than, okay, say from the top, can you hear me? Okay, great. I'm a senior at Palo Alto High School, and other than being on Connect Safely's Youth Advisory Council, I'm also on my city's youth council, Palo Alto Youth Council. I fundraise for Rise Together Education, which helps students at my school who come from low-income backgrounds afford college. I'm a rower, and I do journalism at my school.
Hi, I'm Ovee. I'm a sophomore at Saratoga High School from California, and I'm a part of Snapchat's Council for Digital Wellbeing, where we as a group are working to make Snap a safer place for teens online. Besides that, I'm also on my city's youth commission, where we're focusing on creating events partnered with the city council towards youth involvement in our city.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jacqueline Beauchere, and I serve as the Global Head of Platform Safety at Snap, the company behind Snapchat. And Ovee is one of our youth that are here today. We have two other youth here today as well, serving on our inaugural Council for Digital Wellbeing. Pleasure to be with you.
Hey, and I'm Matt Soeth. I'm the Executive Director for Thriving in Games Group, also known as TIG for short. I've been there only a few months. We're a brand new nonprofit focused heavily on game design, game development, very technical stuff. Previously, I was on the Global Trust and Safety team at TikTok. If you're from here in the Central Valley, I also helped start a nonprofit you may know called I Can Help. And I'm also on the board for the Aaron Judge All Rise Foundation, which if you like baseball, you know him. And if you don't, that's okay. You probably don't. That's okay, too.
So I had a little conversation with Anika and Ovee a little bit before this, and I told them that I really want to hear from them, really. This is their opportunity to speak to industry, to speak to policymakers. Tell us. Let's listen to them because they're building the future that they have to live in. We're not living in it. So really want to make sure that you have time along with these amazing industry representatives as well. I want to hear your voice. The Common Sense Media just did a research project where they found out that 6 in 10 teens ages 13 to 18 years old expressed doubt that tech companies will prioritize their mental health and well-being over profit. This is tough to hear from somebody from industry. This is really, really tough to hear. And I really would love to open it up in terms of getting your perspectives on that bit of research. Is it true?
Yes, I definitely see this in my community and in myself and young people around me. I think that we all know that these companies are for-profit companies. Obviously, we don't want that to change, but I think that paired with not always seeing the results of the different safeguards that are put in place and not always knowing what resources are accessible to us in order to make these social media and online areas and spaces safer can lead to these feelings that these companies don't necessarily care about our well-being.
Yeah, just to add on to that, I think the topic of generative AI and social media and digital safety itself, I don't think it's properly addressed in terms of a school community. As terms of me and my friends, we're definitely aware of the fact that, our digital privacy is not always a top priority, especially for these companies. So that statistic does in fact speak to that. But in terms of generative AI specifically, I don't think people really understand how much their digital safety is being compromised, especially when they give personal information or things like that that generally compromise their safety online. And on social media, there definitely have been complaints about people not seeing the content that is truly appropriate to what they want to see. And not that they don't really understand how that works, it's just that they don't want to see it. And I know people that have put through reports and they've put through complaints, but they haven't always been implemented. So that statistic does in fact cover that people don't really understand, and also they're not seeing the changes that they want to see.
Got it. Jacqueline, Matt, do you have a point of view on it?
Well, I don't believe Snapchat was actually included in that research, but I'm going to leave that aside. I can just say that from our perspective, we are very committed to teen and youth health and safety on the platform. And I'll be sharing some research that we do every year to provide that evidentiary base, not just for Snapchat, but for the entire ecosystem. We have a cross-disciplinary effort across the company. Basically, every aspect, every discipline, every function within the company is dedicated to trust and safety and building that kind of building safety really into the DNA of the platform. We are about teens. We are for teens. We are for young people on the platform. So we are not foregoing that responsibility whatsoever. But we do believe that it does take others as well. Safety, as Nicole from Meta pointed out earlier, it's about risk mitigation. There is no absolute state of being safe online or anywhere else. And that's something that we really need to grasp as a society broadly, and then we can all approach it together. It takes parents, it takes educators, it takes students, it takes tech companies, it takes law enforcement and government and everyone really doing their part. It really is a whole of society approach that we need to adopt.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, it can be a nice North Star, but the understanding is it will never be reached, right? Matt, do you have thoughts?
Yeah, I think the biggest shift that I'm seeing in that regard is trying to show how prioritizing safety and well-being actually improves the overall experience of a game, right? That we can go as a safety team or safety professional, you can point to specific data, KPIs, and metrics and said, hey, if we do this, like our players do better in these spaces. And one of the general mantras is if players thrive, platforms thrive. So now it's a matter of trying to tie that to very specific data and metrics about how not just doing the right thing, but having tools and mechanisms in place to implement all of those things has a direct impact on the bottom line of the platform. And if you can start to tie financial goals into overall player and community goals, and you start to see that things improve, that conversation is just coming around, because previously a lot of the conversations and metrics have been around overall performance and user retention and numbers that a lot of people, if you work in marketing and business, you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. When we talk about the human interaction and the human satisfaction of existing in these spaces and playing games and having positive connections, like that's been the thing I'm trying to quantify that's been much more challenging.
Yeah, and I also know, here at Roblox, we spend an inordinate amount of resources and time developing educational materials. But I mean, to be completely honest, we need to really look intricately at ourselves to make sure that we're landing that in a really, really authentic way and we're using the right channels to deliver. So to your point, it's delivered to you authentically. So yeah, thank you for that. I do want to turn things over to Jacqueline to give an overview on the Digital Wellbeing Index that you mentioned. So if you could maybe take us through that.
Sure. Thanks, Tami. And I've got some notes because I'm going to give you a couple of data points. So for the past 3 years, this is our third year that we're doing this Digital Wellbeing Index that we release every year on International Safer Internet Day, the full results. And it's basically us surveying teens and young people, young adults, in 6 geographies. So in Australia, Germany, France, India, the UK, and the US. And this research surveys 6,000 young people and 3,000 parents of teenagers between the ages of 13 and 19. And what we're finding is that what we do is we ask them about the risks that they're exposed to online. We ask them about the various encounters that they're having online in terms of how we fashion this index. And the index is based on a long-standing model, academic model of well-being. And it's called the PERMA model. And we've adapted it for the online world. It's now called the PERNA model, where we're asking people about their positive and negative emotions, their engagement, their relationships, and their achievement online. And for every respondent, we assign them an index reading. Then we total up those index readings per country and then across all 6 geographies. And we're asking people about their risk exposure, that they've actually experienced risk over the course of the past 3 months. And this latest data was compiled in June of last year. So the operative period is basically April, May, and June of last year. The interesting thing is that the index has actually risen 1 point in this 3rd year to a level of 63. On a scale of 0 to 100, it's kind of an average reading. It's really nothing to write home about, but it's nothing too overly worrisome either. It's pretty average, but it has gone up over the past 2 years. So here we are at a 63 for the index. What's interesting there is that the index actually rose, but young people, teens ages 13 to 17, and young adults ages 18 to 24 actually experienced risk at a higher level last year than they had in the previous 2 years. 80%, 8 in 10 youth said that they experienced some risk online between, say, April and June of last year. Now, those risks could run from something like misinformation that we talked about earlier, or unwanted contact, all the way through to some more egregious risks and harms like something of a sexual nature. But the good news in all of this is where I got to go to the notes because I want to get the stats exactly right, is that Generation Z teens and young adults are actually reaching out for help once they've experienced an online risk. This is up, and this is up a marked amount. Nearly 6 in 10, 59% sought help in 2024, up again 9 percentage points from the previous year. That is a good thing. They're reaching out to parents. They're reaching out to caregivers, their friends, their peers, hotlines, helplines, and platforms. And we need to continue to encourage that. We'd like them to reach out earlier, but at least they are reaching out. Also, parents are more engaged. Half of parents, a preponderance, 51%, said that they actively checked in with their teens about online life, also up a not statistically insignificant 9 percentage points, again, from the previous year. And I want to emphasize, this is our contribution, Snap's contribution to the entire ecosystem, to again add to that evidentiary base. We commission this research, but this is not specific to Snapchat. This is across all platforms, all devices, all services in all of these 6 countries. So I wanted to make one other point, which is once we compile the actual index for the respondent for the country across 6 countries, we have 4 categories that we put these scores in. And they range, as you could imagine, from struggling online, middling, thriving, and then flourishing. And we want to encourage more young people to be flourishing online. So over the past 3 years, it's basically broken out kind of by the 80-20 rule. So you could imagine that 10% on each of the extremes and then 80% in the middle. But why I raise these 4 categories is that it's important to know that young people who have more support assets available to them in the home, in school, in the community, they have a higher rate of digital well-being. Support assets are defined as those people at home, in school, in the community that believe in them, believe they're going to be a success in life, that have their back, that can share their problems, that will listen to them. So it's just a reminder for us to be open to young people reaching out in case they have some issue online, and also for us to be proactive in that engagement and reach out to young people and see how they're doing. More support assets available, higher digital well-being. That's just a smattering. There's literally an 85-slide deck that we've just posted today about all of this research, a blog, some other assets. Please research Snap Digital Wellbeing Index, and you'll find all of it.
Oh my God, Jacqueline, I am in there. I am like so excited to dig in. And thank you for conducting that research. It's so needed. I'm really optimistic that kids are actually calling out for help and they're recognizing when they need help. I do think going back to risk mitigation, I think it's really, really important for us to make sure that we're talking to and providing the support in the right places for disenfranchised kids who don't have all of the family support and the access, right? Again, really focusing in on, and it's maybe easy to say a lot of these kids who have the support at home, it's really important to make sure that we're not missing out on these other groups of children. I am going to swing it over to Matt because I think this was a good segue into some of the peer research report that you did at TIG, and then we can have a discussion.
Yeah, so a lot of the stuff, if you look at this past year, Pew Research published a lot of data around how young people are gaming, right? Something like 73% engage in gaming on the regular. So numbers like 80%. Feel free to check me on these. These are like rough numbers. I'm rounding down. I was an English major. But the idea, find some type of just solace in playing games every day. It's connecting with friends, it's mental health. And a lot of this tracks. I know it was just a few years ago that we were all in a lockdown in our homes and told that if we didn't go online and engage with people, bad things are going to happen. And I think we're seeing now some of the fallout from that, the pendulum swinging back, whereas like we're on screens too much. We have to scale this back now, which we've seen that pendulum swing back and forth a lot. So one of the challenges we heard reiterated a lot today is how do we have these more nuanced conversations? Like when does that screen time connection, when does it bring you joy? When does it add you stress? When does it become too much? And that's where I think we need to have some of those bigger conversations as we look at the experiences young people are having online and the type of connections. Like my son in particular, a lot of his social connections comes through games. He still plays with friends in the neighborhood, things like that. But when he goes online, like they have these prescribed times that he meets with his friends and they get together, they do this. For my daughter, it's a bricklayer game. Like if she finishes her homework, the iPad's out, and it's usually when I get the request for like screen time or something. But like that's her moment to like disconnect and to deal with stress, which is another thing we're seeing in young people. So I think trying to put too much into this is really bad or this is really good, we need to look at sort of the structured nature of like, when is it good or bad? When does it add value? When does it sort of make your life more enjoyable or appreciative versus not? From a gaming standpoint, what we've seen is if we're going to design spaces online for anyone, how we design those spaces should matter. And so thinking through sort of some of these kind of natural intervention points of just checking in, how's your well-being today? Like in the Wii, this is dating myself a little bit, but the Wii would pop up and said, have you been outside lately? Right? So games having that. So really trying to think about within the structure of a gaming format, when does it make sense to check in with someone's well-being? Because if it's too much there, it's just like, look, I just want to be at this level. You asked me 5 times how I'm feeling. I ain't got time for this. So it's really trying to find that balance of when does checking in with someone sort of seem natural and fluid and part of the experience versus when is it something that actually detracts from the overall experience, which is why you showed up in the first place.
So we spend a lot of time at Roblox talking about how do we innovate on integrating pro-social features into the product that allow for kids to, and also test. Again, we announced our teen council. Yay, because teen councils are so amazing. We announced our teen council. And so one of the things we really want to get out of it is testing out some of this pro-social behaviors online to see if we can create more positive outcomes within Roblox. Would love to hear from you guys in terms of how you use social media and gaming to approach that in terms of mental well-being.
Yeah, I can start with this one. I think it's really important to note how much social media and how much technology has been ingrained into our daily lives. I want to bring up the TikTok ban. I'm sure many of you have heard of it. But one story that I would like to mention is that people have a physical response to opening their phone and clicking on the app. And so the fact that this has become so ingrained that we physically can't put the phone down or we physically can't get ourselves to put the phone down is a really important fact to notice. And I think the best way to get around that is to kind of be ambassadors in our own community and focus on how we can release ourselves from this trap hold that we have on social media. And so that's one thing that Snap itself has been trying to highlight, is that in our own communities, we've been trying to spread the message about being safe online, using the tools that we have been given, such as the report feature or the block feature, to make ourselves be safe online. Because it's one thing to be safe with yourself, and it's one thing to hear about somebody else being themselves, and to actually make that change and incorporate it in your daily lives is something really important to do.
Yeah, I agree with that, especially building off of what you were talking about with the resources and making sure that we're utilizing the report feature, the block feature, all of that. I know that some of my friends turn their phones, they make them black and white, and not having the color on the screen is really helpful to them to not get super absorbed into their phone and not be able to put it down. And we've been talking about all day about all of these new safeguards and these new technologies, things on the apps that will help people manage their time better and have a better relationship with technology. But I think that in the absence of people knowing about those and actually having a reason to use them, then it doesn't matter anymore if they're there, if nobody uses them.
I'm just writing down notes to advocate back internally. So, in terms of what teens want, one of the things that I always think is pretty amazing, how you guys use social media, right? I think that it was brought up before that I think that social media has been so villainized, right? But there are so many positive aspects in terms of how you use it specifically for well-being. Can you speak to how you use it and how it's brought some sameness or connection?
Yeah, I think a lot of the talks that we've heard today, especially towards kind of the parents in the room, or especially towards the not older people, but you know what I'm saying.
No, it's okay.
They have a different view on social media compared to the people, like the kids that use it almost every single day. I know that, speaking from my mom, she definitely has more of a negative view on social media because she doesn't really know what I'm doing on it. And I keep trying to tell her that what I'm doing on it is that I'm connecting with friends, I'm making connections, I'm constantly connecting with people that I know and then that I can trust, and I'm building on it. And I can tell you how many times that I started laughing at my phone from a text that I got from my friend, or watching an Instagram reel or watching a TikTok about something super relatable or funny. And I think that's an aspect that doesn't get talked about as much as the negative things that happen. It's inevitable that people will take advantage of such platforms and they will use it for malicious intent, but there's also a complete other side that doesn't even get talked about as much, which is also an equally important part to cover.
Yeah, hopping off of that, I think that social media it does hold a lot of risks. It's a new technology. Everything honestly holds risks, but there are many benefits, and we're even just starting to explore what we can do with social media. So we're talking about mental health here, and I think that a lot of the companies today and the people representing their companies have touched on how they're making their apps not harm their users' mental health. But I think there's also a great opportunity for apps and social media websites and people using the social media websites to counter adverse mental health impacts that are separated from social media. So, for example, in states that have limited education, like, for example, in Florida with the Don't Say Gay bill, one of the other parts of that bill that you might not have heard of is that people can no longer teach sex education freely. If any parent in a school has a complaint about the sex education curriculum, they're required to remove it. And so not having these things in school that teach you about your identity and your sexuality and where you can find a community and your health, then social media becomes a place that can help support that, and it can actually support people's mental health in ways that isn't negatively impacted by social media in the first place. But it's a great opportunity for us to explore those other things as well.
Yeah, and then one more quick thing that I want to bring up on the topic of mental health. I think there's obviously this aspect of parents thinking about how their kids are just scrolling away, like doom scrolling is what we call it, or rotting, where you just like can't get off your phone. But I think there's another aspect of coping with stress that social media does in fact help. Actually, the first thing that I usually do is that if I have a couple of tests and I'm really, really stressed and I think that I can't get anything done because I'm just so worried, the first thing that I would do is obviously talk to my parents. But after that, I would try to message my friends and see if they could also help. And playing a game or watching a couple of reels or watching a couple like funny videos actually is the thing that I find the most helpful in terms of dealing with stress. I know that can differ from many different people, like listening to music or exercising, but at least for me, that's something that can help with stress in a really quick way.
That's awesome. There is a nonprofit organization called Center for Scholars and Storytellers, and they're based out of UCLA. And they do some amazing research with teens. They have sociologists who, and academics and researchers who contribute. And they have just released a huge teen report. 77% of teens said they felt lonely. Right, that's an enormous percentage, right? 77%. A lot of these teens, and again, the whole purpose of this nonprofit is to really share this information with entertainment companies, gaming companies, social media companies, and advise on what they can do about it. And one of the things that we're seeing is that in this survey, gaming is actually going up. And one of the things that's important for teens, especially given what's going on in the world today, fantasy is very, very popular because escapism is a great way to get into a different mindset, right, in mind space. What are your thoughts in terms of that loneliness percent? What can we do about it?
Yeah, I think I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because while we're all talking about how connected social media can definitely bring you to, there's also a big percent that also leaves you feeling lonely. You may be able to chat with your friends, or you may be able to see stories, you may be able to see the videos that they post, but because you're not interacting with them physically, it can still feel lonely. Like, I've been in situations where I haven't had the best day, maybe, it hasn't been the best day at school, and I come home and then I'm trying to get my work done and I'm trying to relax by, using coping methods and going on my phone, but it just leaves me feeling even more lonely than before because I'm not physically interacting with somebody. If my parents are at work, or if my sister is out home and I'm home alone and I'm trying to do my homework, and social media can help, but it can also leave you feeling even more lonely than before.
I'd add on that I think that social media is a tool and it can help in all of the ways that were just said, but definitely finding a balance between that and physical interaction and relationships with people is so vital to somebody's mental health, because we all lived through COVID, the pandemic. We know that having those online relationships, it doesn't feel the same. It feels artificial a little bit, even if it's people that you know and you see every day. And so having those connections, both in person and potentially online, can be a great way to interact with people when you're separate, but also still maintain that connection that you only get from being together physically.
So, with all of the bans that are going on right now, do you think that's going to solve the problem?
I actually think that it should be a conversation about awareness versus restriction. I can speak on personal stories that my parents have in the past put lots and lots of screen times. I used to have 10 minutes on TikTok, 15 minutes on Instagram, 5 minutes on Snapchat. And I would just say that the more restrictions that parents put on the kids, the harder and harder they'll try to resist them. And I'm not trying to get in trouble here, but I have found ways to get around my screen time. I've gone on my computer, I've disabled the screen time password, and I can definitely speak on behalf of all the other kids in this room that they definitely have explored ways to. And so I would just say, again, going back, that the more restrictions you put, the harder and harder that people will try to resist. And the TikTok ban and the Australian ban are really good examples of that, because I think, in fact, if you try to stop something, then people will try probably even worse ways to get around it and use something else to fulfill that. And so I think restricting it wouldn't be the best solution, but finding ways to limit and finding ways to kind of have that middle ground is the best way to go about it.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think that when you have these social media restrictions and restrictions around any of this stuff like AI, people are just going to find other ways to get around it. And often those are going to be less safe ways, because if there is a mainstream app that you use like Snapchat that has these safety restrictions, and then when your screen time is disabled, you go to an alternate app, then that your parents might not know about, then they don't have as much control over that. So having that communication and kids feeling like they can and want to be telling their parents everything they're doing online requires trust both ways.
Thank you. So I could listen to you all day, but we are running out of time here, as I'm being told. So I'm going to just go down the line and ask you one question. What's your one piece of advice for the people who are in the room, whether it be parents, policymakers, or industry, that can help you to digitally flourish? Anika.
Yeah, I'd say the biggest thing that could apply to everybody across all industries is having transparency and education about all of the amazing things that you are all doing to support young people using your app and to support people's mental health, because having all of these things, putting them in place, only matters if people are actually encouraged and want to use those safeguards.
Yeah, I think echoing that, transparency is a big thing. I think for teens specifically, understanding why these limits are being put in the first place is crucial. Like, for example, understanding what doing too much on your phone can do to you. Like, if you spend too much on your phone, then what long-term consequences will that have for you? Or seek out tools that can help you, like using the report feature, using the block feature, being more conscious of how you're using your social media or how your digital practices can harm you in the future.
Okay, newsflash, I'm not a member of the Snapchat generation. So I would say I do believe in the transformational power of technology. Technology is taking us forward, as every innovative and disruptive technology has come before it. But so much is about conversation, and as these ladies have said, raising awareness, education, and it's about conversation that can lead to those things. So when having those conversations, whether those are educators, parents, school officials, others, have those conversations and listen to those young people, listen to them suspending judgment, and listen to them with the intent of being moved, not dug into our own positions, like, why would you want to do this for 8 hours a day, et cetera, but listen and understand them, because this is their world now, and we're just kind of visiting.
Matt.
Yeah, just adding to that, I think as an adult, I see a lot of times with my own kids is I'm evaluating their experience in life with what I had when I was their age. And because it's different, can I argue if it's better or worse? My parents do the same thing. And so really having the conversation keep forward, really trying to understand our relationship with tech, particularly how fast that changes. Like students who I now have in their 30s versus their siblings who are just a few years younger have a different relationship with tech than anything that's happening in high school right now. And so really trying to understand those different stages. What does that look like? How has it evolved? And hopefully keep that conversation going. We were having a much more evolved conversation around well-being today than we were even 5 years ago. So trying to keep that going and see what that looks like and hopefully come to a consensus. And then as a result, we can end up being just a support for each other and how we define our own relationships with tech. What does well-being mean for us? What does that look like? And how can we be supportive?
Thank you so much. Well, I've learned so much from this amazing panel. I hope you have too. But unfortunately, our time is at an end. Thank you.